Cancer rising, no doubt you've heard a lot of hype and spin around Barbo's basket. This is what it looks like typically for a Cancer whole sign risings chart. I'm going to break down every single component as best I can. I'm Sukboy, you're awesome. Let's talk about it. This aspect pattern is made up of what we call generational planets and a social planet, Jupiter. So you may not experience this on an individual level. You may observe it though in the cultural collective or cultural zeitgeist. And that's really important to understand, that you might not experience an event. We might not experience an isolated event. It's more like an unfolding of events that has already been happening for some time. And so where does the clock actually start? Well, we can take it all the way back to 2000 when a generation of people were born. They're now coming into 20-something maturity. And so as they gain age and experience, they will gain more influence, and their worldview will actually impact the way that society is run. For example, they don't know a world that internet doesn't exist. And so interfacing with technology is going to be a big theme of what this Barbo basket actually represents for us. Collectively, this will see the acceleration of potentially techno-feudalism, the control and distribution over capital resources, informational resources, and most of all, our attention span, what we're guided to value and pay attention to. After all, we live in an attention economy. Therefore, this upcoming generation could actually see a clash between the old established order. Even the people that set up Silicon Valley, for example, the new entrepreneurs coming through with fresh ideas could actually clash against the personal interests of the technological establishment, let's say. This could be a huge move towards liberating people by giving people more access to information and what's really going on, the rise of legitimate alternative media. And think about it, before the 2000s, it was still a very attractive situation to have a 9-to-5 job, to be able to buy a house, to have a nuclear family, so on and so forth. Now, whilst that is true, and it might not be going anywhere immediately, there has been a splintering off of the workforce, and now a lot of people are actually living their life out online. In fact, it's almost non-negotiable to not have some kind of presence online. So we see the rise of the influencer and the personal brand and alternative media. And again, it splinters our attention, and it basically makes silos or facets of different kind of cultural groups representing different belief systems, and the entire culture has access to it. Now, this Barbo basket is about centralizing that power and centralizing our attention, whilst at the same time, the collapse of the establishment. And so the rules are being written right now in real time. And so we see the populace potentially rise up against the established order and try to decentralize the access to information, the access to media, and where we get our news from, where we get our information from. Blindly following the authority could seriously be questioned. Trusted sources and fact checkers are all but thrown out the window as we actually go to sovereign beings that have done independent research, and they've got some kind of platform that they can give you an alternative perspective from. But as that happens, the powers that be become more controlling, more insecure, and louder, and potentially a lot more authoritarian about what you cannot say and see. So the tech bros in Silicon Valley merging with the governing force and basically monetizing and controlling our personal preferences or our digital avatars. And over the next 6 years, maybe even in July, we'll see some events roll out that actually accelerate digital ID and digital currency, whilst at the same time having some kind of huge grassroots movement clash against that. We might see worldwide protests, not necessarily in July, but events start to unfold that make that a lot more comfortable for people to actually know what's going on. And yes, I'm not naive. Of course, these things are already happening. They're already brewing. And I would actually start the clock of this particular synodic cycle, not in 2000, not in the global financial crisis, although there are serious indicators that activity was happening then. I actually want to start the clock at the start of the pandemic. So Cancer rising, think about who you were back then. Your belief systems, have they changed? Have you become more critical or discerning about where you get your information from? Has there been a huge clash or pivot of worldview? What you thought the real world and reality was about could be very different now. And how have you evolved or changed since then? Have you become disillusioned by the establishment or the industry that you chose to move into as a career? All these things can get pretty foggy when you've got Neptune moving through your 10th house. So let's break this down for you in particular. First up, Jupiter, the ruler of your sixth house of lifestyle, everything you do every day, let's say, the house of service, the house of health, and also it is the ruler of your ninth house of worldview. It's now moved into your second house. I've already covered this in the Leo series that I made. Go for a scroll if you want to check that out for Cancer rising. But it's going to be forming an opposition with Pluto in your eighth house. These are financial houses. What does that mean? This is all about having confidence about your livelihood. Where is the next meal coming from? How are you surviving in this world? Leo is asking you to take the initiative. And so that means maybe changing your daily habits and also changing your relationship with finances within that ninth house of worldview. But this charge between Jupiter and Pluto is basically charging you up and it's making you feel uncomfortable. And so you could see yourself, reviewing you and your business partners, you and your joint finances, you and your shared assets, tax matters, wanting to pay down debt faster, not letting it hang around too much longer. There could be new financial agreements, reviewing money that you've inherited or reviewing insurance claims, for example. Your mortgage, maybe you need to refinance. Some of you will be facing fears around financial security. This creates pressure for change, but it doesn't need to be inherently negative. Emotionally, what have you become attached to and that you need to detach from? What have you become dependent on, especially when it comes to other people's resources? This eighth house Pluto situation is asking for some kind of psychological transformation, potentially around crisis, potentially around grief and loss, that it forces you to take more sovereignty when it comes to your own livelihood. Jupiter's here to teach you something, so it might teach you what you're afraid of, really, what emotional baggage needs releasing, and what does crisis teach you, and how do you operate within crisis? Do you become subjective and maybe inhabit some kind of victim mentality, or do you become more objective and just go out there and solve the problem? Maybe that feels a little cold. Maybe you have to be the bad cop in some situations and let people down. The beauty of this aspect pattern is, sure, we get the opposition, which is rather tense, a crisis point, let's say. We also get these blue lines that kind of funnel off to Neptune and Uranus. So they're ultimately the best way to solve your problems. The Uranus in the 12th house is extremely intuitive. And that's going to be asking you to be ruthlessly curious, crunch the data. Don't avoid looking at the stats, at the books. That could just prolong a crisis down the track. You actually want to be pretty financially hygienic in this time and don't allow it to scare you. The sooner you know, the sooner you will be equipped to tackle that situation. This might mean that you need to take some time in solitude. The 12th house is all about removing yourself for a second, withdrawing for a second, and letting the dust settle. You might realize that you've become rather hypervigilant and you don't know why. And it might have something to do with your attachments, your dependencies. You need to find your independence. Uranus in the 12th house unconsciously is stirring the pot, so to speak, making you feel uncomfortable so you can find your independence. You can be ruthlessly curious, you can question, you can discern, and revolt or evolve from your current situation and find your liberation. The Neptune up in the 10th house is a little bit more murky, but this is basically following your instincts when it comes to your spiritual sovereignty, not idealizing or falling for false prophets. This is astrology included. Maybe people that you follow online, you've given up your spiritual sovereignty. You think that fate exists in someone else's hands, like the chapt, for example, and you sacrifice your free will. This might not be true. Whilst at the same time having unexpected insights and unexpected individuation of your true nature and what you truly believe in. Some of you might shift from, say, material atheists to hardcore Christians, or hardcore Christians to astrologists. Look, I'm not sure, whatever model works for you. This Neptune-Jupiter trine is really all about giving you options and giving you opportunities to be sovereign in meaning. What does your life mean? What is the purpose of your life? Have you cut yourself off to certain possibilities? Do you need to explore, expose, and discover new ways of thinking about what this world really is? If you do realize that you're scared of something, that is probably the Pluto in the 8th house. And the trine to Uranus gives you wake-up calls, gives you epiphanies. Sudden events could just flip on you all of a sudden, and you become very conscious of these unconscious fears that have been holding you back or giving you limiting beliefs. Potentially discovering hidden patterns of betrayal or people manipulating you in some way. Now, again, it's bad that that happened, but it's good that you know about it. So ultimately, it's a win at scale if you think about it. The Neptune allows you to be more compassionate and forgive and individuate. Just because you forgive doesn't mean you have to forget. And basically being brave in the face of manipulation, betrayal, lies being told to you, so on and so forth. For some of you, this could mean a split up. This could mean a divorce, a separation. This could mean the collapsing of your business partnerships and getting more autonomy, due diligence, responsibility, accountability for your own situation, your own life path forward, how you view the world, your own spiritual philosophy, and ultimately your bag, your livelihood, how you support yourself. As a thank you for watching this entire video, please feel free to send me a DM. I'll send you a coupon code for 30 Australian dollars off my natal and birth chart readings. Obviously, this is an overview of the Barbo basket. I'd actually have to see your particular chart to know and understand how it actually plays out, not only for the month of July, but for the next remaining 6 years of the synodic cycle between, Saturn, Jupiter, and Pluto, whatever was happening back in the day when we moved into that pandemic. Who have you become since, and what are you halfway through? Hope that helps. Okay, bye.